Hello. Today we will begin talking about how to write programs in Python. Before we begin actually writing and executing our code, it's important that we first understand the basics. Code is the common word we use for the textual representation for our program, and a line is a row of text in that program. The lines we would typically write involve some sort of instruction, whether that be input, processing, or output. These instruction lines are called statements, and for each statement, it would typically appear on its own line. We will continue to progress and start looking at variables, identifiers, expressions, and many more exciting aspects that make up the world of coding. We will then later look at errors, which will happen frequently while you are progressing, and even how to create more advanced functions. For now, though, we'll just take a look at a few examples of the basics. Alright, so here is an example of a very basic written program. As you see here, you have an introductory comment that kind of tells you to display the area and perimeter. It gives you the width and the height values, and then it'll give you the formulas. So a lot of times when you are prompted to write a code, it will give you a introductory, or it'll give you a prompt, just something to kind of base what your code off of. And then once we go down and look at the code itself, we see that we have the variables here, we have literals being assigned, we have expressions being used, we have our output statements both here, and we have our single line comments that kind of describe each instruction that's happening. These are all very basic aspects of each program you're going to write, and you're going to want to be able to apply these as you start writing more programs. And so as we mentioned, this was a very basic written program. It went ahead and gave us the width and the height values. It went ahead and gave us the expressions we need to use. So really all we had to do was copy those down and write the print statements for both of those. So let's go ahead and run this just to see what our output will be. So there we have it. We have a 35 with a very long decimal part or decimal point, which later we will be able to round down and just cut it off to a few certain decimal points. And then we have our 24.8 for the perimeter. So let's take a look at the way we can change this, which later on we'll be able to figure out and do a little better. All right, so let's say we're given a prompt once again. However, we are not given any of the values. So what we could do is we can eventually get to the point where we can start taking input from the user to where we can write the width and then make that a float declaration with a input statement that'll then ask the user to enter the width. And then we can do the same thing with the height. We can make that its own variable. We can declare it a float. We can use an input prompt and then get the height from the user. So once we do this, we of course need to change our 4.5. We need to just change that to the width, because that's all we know is it's width times height. And we'll do that with our perimeter and area, both of them. All right, so once we change that, we go ahead and run this again. It'll then ask us for the width first. So the width, if you remember, was 4.5. Then it's going to ask us for the height, and then of the height, if you remember, it was 7.9. So once we hit enter, we see we have the exact same results as before. So it just shows one different variation of the way you can write your code. All right, so that was two different ways in which you can write the same code. It kind of went over the basics of each one and just showed the basics of a program that you will see as you progress.